Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Please come and take a seat and we will get started. It's a little bit cooler in here than in the hallway, which is lovely. So enjoy the coolness whilst you can. Some rooms are air conditioned, both the lecture theatres are air conditioned, so we can. You don't often say that in the UK, do you? But anyway, I don't think I've ever said that before. But anyway, welcome everybody to this event, both in person, so everyone in the room here, and also all of you online. Welcome to UCL and welcome to the Warning Research Centre's first international conference called Creating Effective Warnings for All. Why are we here? What's the importance of this conference? Well, we have just seen the Sendai midterm framework review with a number of key things that need to be focused on, warnings being one of them, and we'll be hearing about that shortly. The Early Warning for All initiative, which I am sure many of you are aware of, by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, which was launched last year in March. And we also, following COVID-19, which of course all of us remember all too well, has led to a complete review of a pandemic treaty globally as to how we can deal with global warnings as well. It is vital that we invest in the future of warning systems, with more frequent and extreme weather hazards being experienced from anthropogenic warming, with 1.1 billion out of 6.1 billion people, that's just over 18% of the world's population, living in acute multidimensional poverty across 110 countries, which increases vulnerability. And of course, all of us everywhere being in an ever interconnected, complex global community prone to misinformation and also political influence. Personally, I witnessed the tragedy of the 2004 Boxing Day tsunami in the Indian Ocean, and I could see the critical importance of, well, A, having a warning system in place, and B, them being effective. And following my own PhD research on volcano warnings that finished in 2011, I could see that warnings were not being designed and built based on robust and systemic links between research, policy, and practice across relevant disciplines. After many years of trying to push the research agenda academically, it is so lovely to have a conference that is just purely dedicated to this topic. So how can we work together? During the COVID-19 pandemic, I could see, despite having studied volcanoes, that the UK COVID-19 alert level system was not going to succeed. And indeed, it was highly mocked across the UK media. So much warning sits in silos via the agencies that manage each hazard. But I realized that if we could share information of warnings across the different hazards, we could develop better, more robust systems and ones that cope with multiple hazards. And given the complex and multiple disciplines, actors, and institutions involved, warnings require an intra- and multidisciplinary approach, which is exceedingly challenging. I'm sure everyone here can appreciate the complexity of warning systems. The time seemed right to set up the Warning Research Centre, and so together with Professor Ilan Kelman, we decided to set up this centre in 2020 as ways of trying to attract attention to the importance of warnings. So the Warning Research Centre brings together experts academically from UCL and across other academic institutions and other partners globally to try and provide the very best and latest research on warnings. And it is, to our knowledge, the only such dedicated facility in the world, providing a community for researchers and practitioners to share ideas and to develop new innovative solutions to complex real-world problems. We also provide research expertise through our research grants, our teaching expertise, policy advice, and public engagement in relation to the warnings, in our ambition to create a global community focused around the excellence of warnings. The Warning Research Centre was officially launched by Mami Mizutori in 2021, who we'll hear from shortly. So we want to, our core aim really, in order to address those big initiatives that are going on right now is to break down those silos between stakeholders, actors, hazard types, geographies, and technologies. And we hope to build new networks to kickstart initial inclusive dialogues and shift perspectives to bridge research, action, and policy that supports early warnings for all, the Sendai framework, and the WHO Convention around the Pandemic Treaty. And this conference will bring together all that expertise. It will bring together all of your expertise. And that is what we hope will make it such a fruitful event. So just to introduce the 3 days, academia in a way can provide that kind of thinking time, that bigger picture. And so we want to use this conference as an opportunity to cast a critical eye and provide answers and establish what those bigger picture questions are and discuss alternative ways of addressing the topic. And in the case of warnings, this can only be done by understanding how warnings work in practice, policy, and institutionally. So different insights and different approaches will be used in this conference to look at a number of 3 key priorities that we've established. Firstly, that warnings require stakeholders to work across different silos. Secondly, that warnings are long-term social processes that require public engagement, empowering people to identify and fulfill their own warning needs for enhancing preparedness, response behaviours and actions. And thirdly, warnings that require integration across different vulnerabilities to respond to multiple hazards, sequences and cascades. And therefore, we have 3 corresponding sessions for our 3 corresponding days, the first day being multi-sectoral, multi-hazard collaboration. Tomorrow being turning the last mile into the first mile. And this is really about how we can create more inclusive, bottom-up approaches involving public engagement and embedding warnings into our social processes. And then the final day is working and focusing on integrating warnings over space and time. So we want to create in this conference space to explore, to discuss those really challenging aspects. And this conference is highly interactive. We want you guys to be highly involved in the process. We are having workshops, simulations, campfire sessions. We have also a number of artists and performers within our conference that will help create an ambience where we can get our hands dirty and really start to think about some of the critical issues. You may, in fact, and those of you online will be safe, but those of you in person may in fact be kidnapped by some of our artists who want to take you into a dark room and ask you your deepest secrets and fears and concerns around warning systems. And I know nobody wants to talk about it. So what Ham and Eugenia, who are sitting at the back there, and Amelia will be doing is converting those into cartoons. So we'll bring some humor to it, but hopefully through this process, we can find out a little bit more about what those key blocking points are. So we also have a graphical reporter, Lorna, at the front here, who will be recording the sessions graphically and creating these amazing graphics. You will see, hopefully at the end of this session, a sample of that. I met Lorna at a recent conference in Germany, and it's really great to have those summary points because we kind of get overwhelmed by information at conferences. So I really hope that you will enjoy this session and this conference over the next 3 days. Please partake as much as you can because your input is really what is needed. We really want you all to engage, talk to one another and engage with one another. So I'd like to thank our sponsors, firstly, Everbridge, the Lloyd's Register Foundation and Doctors in Africa, Guam. Also REAP, the Risk Informed Early Action Partnership, and CRUISE, the Climate Risk and Early Warning Systems. We are indebted to them to be able to provide support to make this conference happen and to support all the events and activities that are going on. I'd also just like to take a moment just to thank very much our staff, especially Amanda Gallant, who has been amazing running around and helping to organise the event. Ilan Kelman, of course, Claudia, who you'll be hearing from shortly, our volunteers, AV team, Diana at the top doing recording, and also our artists joining us. So the last thing I need to say is it is a very hot day today, so please do keep yourself refreshed. And of course, because this is a warning research centre, it would be utterly remiss of me not to say that if there was a fire, please do exit the building and go to the assembly point at the front. There is no drill today. So if you hear the fire alarm, it is not a drill. So please do grab your things and go. Otherwise, I'll get very much told off. So firstly, I would like to introduce Professor Emma Tobin, who is actually my boss. She's the head of the Department of Science and Technology Studies. So I'll pass over to you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Boss sounds very intimidating and makes me look rather boring, I think. I'm much nicer than that, honestly. So welcome to a very muggy London this morning, quite warm and humid here. But luckily we have aircon in the building. So my job today is to give the shameless plug for UCL and for the departments that are associated with the UCL Warning Research Centre. Okay. So I'd like to welcome you here. It's wonderful to see you all in such a packed conference venue and in face-to-face setting. This is the first international conference that's associated with the UCL Warning Research Centre. So we're really, really excited and pleased to be able to host it here at UCL. The UCL Warning Research Centre is co-hosted by my department, Science and Technology Studies, here at UCL, but also by the Institute for Risk and Disaster Reduction at UCL. So it's a joint endeavour by two departments in the Maths and Physical Sciences faculty. So it's quite an exciting new venture for all of us. By way of introduction, I'm Emma Tobin, so I'm the head of Department of Science and Technology Studies. So I'd like to take this opportunity to issue you all a warm welcome to UCL on behalf of both STS and the IRDR this morning. So a little bit about UCL. I know you all hopefully know a little about UCL already, but I will tell you a little bit about why we think we're renowned internationally. So we've been around since 1826. We are rated second in the UK for research power in last year's REF exercise. But I think more importantly than all of that, throughout history, we've been an institution that's prided itself on equality, diversity, and inclusion. So we were the first institution to allow women to be academics and to attend university here in the UK. So it was set up originally as kind of a secular alternative to Oxford and Cambridge. We were also the first institution to allow people from any religion, any culture, and so on. And I think we still pride ourselves in that today, and we try to continue our multicultural outlook. And I think today's conference is a really good example of that, bringing people together from lots of different backgrounds, cultures, both within the academy, outside the academy, and so on. And I'm really excited by that and like to welcome you all here. My last shameless plug is for my own department. So Carina is part of the Science and Technology Studies department here at UCL. So even though STS is probably something that people might have only heard of for the first time in the 1970s, STS at UCL is actually 100 years old. So we had our centenary last year. So what is STS? So we're a little bit of a mongrel department, right? We've got lots of different disciplines. We've got historians, philosophers, science communicators, some practicing scientists who also do some of those things, and also people who are experts in public engagement. And together, what we try to do is take a multidisciplinary approach to some of the world's practical problems. So some of the questions that might be asked independently in those scientific disciplines, we think we can provide unique answers to them from a multidisciplinary perspective. So the kinds of things we're interested in are, climate change, AI, emerging technologies, social inequality, social justice, and so on. And we think coming from those different disciplines, you can ask distinct questions and perhaps give more nuanced answers. So that's a little bit about the Science and Technology Studies department. But as I said, we are not the only department involved in this. There's also the IRDR. I won't try to do an introduction for them, but they are absolutely awesome too. So the two departments, as I said, are involved there. So we're very excited. I think this conference is a paradigm example, actually, of that kind of interdisciplinary research. I'm really excited to hear that we also have artist collaborators, for example. So the scope is quite broad here. And that's exactly it. It's looking at some of those large, hard problems that we face, of which, of course, risk reduction is one. And trying to give it a multidisciplinary focus and give it an answer that's more nuanced and comes from lots of different perspectives and disciplines and so on. And I think we pride ourselves in that, and I think today will be, and tomorrow will be a real example of that kind of groupthink that, you know, gives us novel and interesting new answers. So that's it from me. I won't keep you any longer. I know why you're really here and what you really want to hear about, but thank you for humouring me. So again, a warm welcome to UCL on behalf of STS and the IRDR. And I'll now hand you over to Carina to start proceedings of the day.
Thank you so much, Emma. That's absolutely wonderful. So what we're going to do is we're going to head over to Zoom now, where we have Mami Mizutori, a special representative, of course, and of the Secretary General for the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction Office. And of course, I'm sure many of you know Ms. Mizutori, but she really brings a lot of experience and 25 years of experience in international affairs and security. And she is also the Executive Director of the Sainsbury's Institute for the Study of Japanese Arts and Cultures, University of East Anglia, since 2011. And prior to this, she served for 27 years in the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs in various capacities. So we are really delighted that Mami is able to join with us today. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I believe Mami is going to be telling us a little bit about what's going on in terms of the Sendai framework and where warnings sit within that. So thank you. Over to you, Mami. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Carina. Dear colleagues and friends, it's truly a pleasure to be back to UCL and this important warning research center. I fondly remember the time when Carina kindly invited me to launch the center. And now you are holding this very timely conference on creating effective warnings for all. I'd like to join in welcoming all of you to what I am certain will be a thought-provoking discussion. As you mentioned, Carina, a space to explore and interact. And this is truly a role that academia can do excellently. So thank you for organizing this conference and inviting UNDRR and myself to be part of it, especially to you, Carina, for your leadership and support for the early warnings for all initiative. We must say that this conference comes at indeed a very sobering moment. This summer, once again, all over the world, we saw climate records shatter because of what I think we can now call almost a runaway climate emergency. July was the hottest month ever recorded on Earth, and the World Meteorological Organization, they have warned us that the next 5 years are likely to be the hottest on record. And as a result of this abnormal weather, but I'm afraid maybe it's not abnormal anymore, we are seeing devastating disasters grip every region. This summer, Europe saw fires in Greece, Italy, Portugal, Spain, while in the United States, the state of Hawaii is still recovering from the deadliest US wildfire in more than a century. Meanwhile, in Asia, record rainfall caused massive floods in northern India, reaching the Taj Mahal, while in China, over 1.6 million people were evacuated and tens of thousands of homes were destroyed as Beijing and its surroundings areas saw the equivalent of 6 months of rainfall in just 4 days. Now, these are some, not all, of the disasters of recent weeks, which we learned about through extensive media reporting. But there are many, many more disasters happening every day in villages, in towns. They never make the news, but they impact the lives and livelihoods of so many people. And it is in this context of increasing disasters that the member states of the United Nations came together in May this year for a high-level meeting on the midterm review of the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. This is what Carina mentioned in her welcoming remarks, and I'd like to talk about this a bit. So the Sendai framework, you'll know, hopefully, was adopted in 2015 by UN member states. The aim is to reduce global disaster risks and losses by 2030. It is the global blueprint for resilience. And it sets 7 global targets that we need to achieve collectively. And while this conference is focused on what we call Target G, which is the expansion of multi-hazard early warning systems, all 7 of the global targets are critical for Sendai. And what did we learn from the midterm review process? Well, many member states and also various non-state stakeholders took part in this process. That's what I want to mention first, because it was a process where everybody wanted to be part of, and that's important, because there are many global agendas around, but I think the attention to the Sendai framework is growing. And the first thing that I must mention, the learning, is that there has been an increase of 80% in the number of people affected by disasters since the framework was agreed only 8 years ago. Second of all, disasters are becoming much more expensive. Average cost above $330 billion every year between, again, 2015 and 2021. And I must say that I'm afraid this figure is significantly undervalued because of underreporting. And of course, the capacity of reporting is not terrific in many countries. Thirdly, at the same time, there has been no corresponding increase in funding for disaster risk reduction, funding for prevention to address these growing risks. And last but not least, the midterm review finds that while no country and nobody is exempt from disasters, they are hitting developing countries the hardest, which is where 90% of disaster deaths continue to occur. Now, the midterm review also pointed to the accumulation of disaster risk intersecting with other crises, such as increasing conflict, growing poverty, and deteriorating ecosystems. We are witnessing that disasters are becoming much more complex and the risk is systemic with cascading impacts. Carina mentioned COVID-19. Let's not forget about it, because the COVID-19 pandemic is the best example of the systemic risk with cascading impact. As you all know, it began as a local health crisis, quickly spreading around the world, killing 6.5 million people. And it became a global disaster that impacted not only our health, but every aspect of our lives. We also saw this last year the floods in Pakistan, devastating the country, which damaged over 4 million acres of agricultural land. And again, the impact did not stay in Pakistan because food insecurity was increased and a lot of pressure was put on the global food markets. Now, these are all alarming findings, but I must also say that despite these enormous challenges, the midterm review did also show that progress has been made. What are they? First, governments and stakeholders are becoming much better at understanding the risks that surround them, thanks to improvements in data quality and analysis. And I must say that academia, the scientific and technological community, has contributed a lot to this. We are encouraged that a growing number of countries are establishing or upgrading their national loss accounting systems, and they are using the Sendai Framework Monitor much wider to report the losses and damages and the achievements they are making. Second, there has been a significant increase in the number of countries that have national strategies for disaster risk reduction. Let's remember, a failure to plan is a plan for failure. And thankfully, to date, 125 countries have reported developing a plan, a strategy for disaster risk reduction. Also, there is a growth in regional cooperation. Southeast Asia, there is a binding agreement of the ASEAN countries on disaster management and emergency response, but also in other regions like Central Asia, they now have an action plan for disaster risk reduction, as well as in the Caribbean. and these are not the only regions, but there are many, many regional cooperations going forward. Very important because, of course, disasters do not respect borders. Third, while a lack of adequate financing of DRR remains a major concern, maybe this is the biggest concern that we still have, there also has been innovation in risk financing and risk transfer mechanisms. This includes the use of adaptive social protection and the use of catastrophe bonds. Fourth, and importantly for this conference, there has been growing recognition and support for strengthening multi-hazard early warning systems with initiatives such as, again mentioned by Carina, Early Warnings for All, which UNDRR is very proud to co-lead with World Meteorological Organization. Nevertheless, the truth is that we are still a long way from reaching a state where the worst disasters are averted, losses are minimized, and importantly, people are safe and communities can prosper. This is why we must accelerate progress in the remaining years until 2030 to implement the political declaration on the midterm review, which was adopted at the high-level meeting that I mentioned in May. It was adopted unanimously by the UN General Assembly, and it lists the actions that we need to take forward on many fronts together. Now, it's a very long list. I'm not going to read it out, but I do encourage you all that if you have not yet read the political declaration, please do. And I'll try to capture the declaration's essence today through two broad calls to action. First, we need to further enhance the understanding and governing the governance of risk. What does this mean? This means that countries must shift responsibility and accountability for disaster risk reduction away from a single agency. This is still the case in many countries where disaster management agencies are resourced poorly, but are often the ones responsible for both responding and preventing from disasters. And they do not have much authority to influence the work of other sectors. This needs to change. We need to put in place urgently a coordinated multi-sectoral risk governance structure where all risks can be considered and acted on by a variety of actors. This is the basis for making risk-informed plans and decisions on all matters pertaining to development and stability. Countries are called upon to assign responsibility for multi-hazard risk reduction to all ministries, which is an all-of-government endeavor. And we must ensure that the capacities are built in all the government and regulatory measures are taken to institutionalize this kind of all-of-government approach. This is the first call of action. So we need to change the way we govern risk. But the second call to action, this is to prioritize investments in risk reduction. This is what I mentioned as the biggest concern we have. Countries are called upon to allocate much larger portions of their national and local budgets to disaster risk reduction, to prevention. In Africa, UNDRR conducted a review of public expenditures. What we found is that on average, countries spend no more than 1% of their budgets on disaster risk reduction. And meanwhile, these same countries spend almost up to 10% of their budgets in order to respond to extreme weather events. So not much is done in terms of prevention, and a lot needs to be done in responding. And we need to address this imbalance. We need to ensure that disaster risk reduction is mainstreamed into public budgeting and investment processes. But we also need to think about a better way of international cooperation when it comes to disasters. We need to drastically change how disaster-related international assistance is distributed. Why? Because currently, 96% of disaster-related international assistance goes to response and recovery, while the remainder, only 4%, goes to prevention. These figures need to be reversed. It's also relevant to acknowledge that the private sector has a big role to play as a driver of investments in prevention, and we need to enhance their role. Regulators need to impose rules, but also offer incentives so that the private sector is encouraged to make risk-informed investments. And this includes encouraging financial institutions to make disaster risk reduction a core principle of their system and to address market short-termism and failures that impact the pricing and consideration of disaster risk. So this is, in summary, what needs to be done to achieve the Sendai framework, and where does this fit in the early warnings for all initiative? Now, obviously, the initiative is a key effort to achieve together target G and to expand early warning coverage for all. But I'd like to say that the importance of this initiative goes much more beyond. The 4 pillars and enabling conditions that are required to have an effective, inclusive, and multi-hazard early warning system are a microcosm of the conditions that every country must meet for an effective disaster risk reduction at large. The 4 elements are, as you know, understanding risk, and then monitoring and forecasting, issuing the warning, communicating, and finally, early action. And indeed, this early warning for all initiative will help countries to be better prepared and to act quickly and adequately to disaster risk. And if we can implement this initiative together, we can fundamentally change, of course, the way that early warning system can help and support people, but we can also change the way that risk is viewed and acted upon. I'd like to point out 3 things to prove my point, hopefully. First, an effective early warning system requires a full understanding of risks, which is about hazard, about vulnerability and exposure. And it is also about open and direct channels between agencies and sectors. And this is exactly what we mean by multi-sectoral risk governance. Second, if we can have an effective early warning system, this also requires the mobilization of funds from many different sources, public, private, and from external. So in other words, we will need to prioritize our investment in early warning systems. And if we do this, we are tackling the big concern about funding. And third, and last but not least, an effective and end-to-end early warning system requires the full engagement of communities addressing the needs of the most vulnerable. And this is what we call the whole of society approach for tackling risk and for leaving nobody behind. I think it's obvious that at every level, we can draw parallels and see how processes and structures can be scaled up from this initiative to influence greater change. And this is why we consider the implementation of the early warnings for all a top priority for UNDRR and for the whole of the UN system. You will be hearing from my colleague Loretta on the initiative and the work that is underway and is being planned. But let me leave you with one final thought. So we do not know how easy or difficult the coming years of implementation will go, but we do know that they will be challenging. We do know that we don't have time to waste. And this is, in a way, our moonshot. And the reward for success would be transformative for people's lives and countries large and small. This is why we choose to do this, not because it's easy, but because it is hard. And we cannot do this alone. We do not know when another chance will appear. So we must do it now, we must do it together, and we must succeed. Because if we can succeed this time, and many of you may know that this is not the first time that the Secretary General of the UN has called for an early warning, early action. Again, climate emergency will just keep on getting ahead of us. So with this ultimate call and plea for action to let's do this together, I would like to thank you all and wish you a very successful conference. Thank you, Carina. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Mami, for your insightful talk. And thank you also so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to speak with us today. We really appreciate it. Thank you so very much. So now we will pass on to Loretta Hieber Girardet. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I will do my best, who is the Chief of Risk Knowledge Monitoring and Capacity Development Branch at the UNDRR globally. She previously served on the UNDRR Asia Pacific region that covers 38 of the world's most disaster-prone countries. And that's indeed a group that we've worked with ourselves, and we're aware of that. And her background is in public health. So we are delighted to have Loretta with us today. So I will just try and pull up the slides for you, and then did you want to speak over there? Yes.
Thank you so much, Carina, and really thank you to all of you for coming today, and congratulations to the UCL Warning Research Center for having the foresight to convene this critical conference, which is really all about learning and learning on early warning. So very timely conference for us. So as you know, as you've just heard from Mami Mizutori, natural hazards combined with high levels of vulnerability and exposure are devastating communities around the world. And the consequences of these events are really felt most severely by the least developed countries, small island developing states, countries that are in crisis situations, conflict, where infrastructure is fragile and resources are limited. And in these regions, what we're seeing is that these disasters do not just erase years of progress, they're actually pushing communities back by generations. And we know that early warning is effective. It gives communities the gift of time to evacuate, time to prepare, time to respond. With a few crucial hours or days of notice, families can safeguard their homes, farmers can better protect their crops, and communities can mobilize resources. And we stand today really on the brink of an era defined by unprecedented technological advances. So we have the opportunity, really, we have the obligation to now start bridging this gap. Technology alone is not a panacea, though. True resilience is cultivated when local communities are involved, when traditional knowledge marries innovation, and when people, and not just systems, are empowered. And for this, we need international collaboration, active public-private partnerships, and a fierce commitment to prioritize those who are most at risk. And this really was the vision behind the United Nations Secretary General's call to action when he announced at last year's COP the ambition to ensure all people in the world are protected by early warning systems in the next 5 years. So it's my pleasure to share with you a bit more information about this global initiative today. So as mentioned, the Secretary General announced this initiative last year at the COP in Sharm el-Sheikh. And his main point was that in the midst of a climate emergency, we know that early warning and early action systems are proven effective and cost efficient. They deliver clear benefits and a tenfold, at least, return on investment. However, half of the countries of the world are globally not protected by early warning systems. And we are seeing not only this phenomena in the developing world, but even in developed countries, we note that the early warning systems do not always function as they are meant to function, and therefore still having too high levels of casualties due to disasters because of failures or flaws or disconnects in the early warning systems. In Africa, 60% of people lack coverage of early warning systems. So when you can imagine the impacts of climate change, increasing the frequency and the intensity of disasters, we know that early warning systems' lack of coverage really provides us with a moral imperative and obligation to rapidly scale up early warning for all. This initiative is sometimes misunderstood as a global project that has been developed at headquarters and is being pushed down to countries. And I would really like to explain that it's not really a project, it's more of a movement. It's an umbrella initiative where through partnership and through collaboration, the UN system, with civil society, with the private sector, we really are trying to encourage much more attention to be focused on the need to scale up early warning systems. We have established a coordination platform at the global level with the pillars led by different entities. So Pillar 1, which is on risk knowledge, is led by UNDRR. Pillar 2 on monitoring and forecasting by the World Meteorological Organization. Pillar 3 on risk communication by ITU, and I'm very pleased to see the head of the ITU's Pillar 3 in the audience, Vanessa Gray. And Pillar 4, the really critical pillar on early action and reaching down to the community level by the IFRC. So these are the pillar leads, but within the pillars are a group of different types of agencies. So the UN, partnerships such as CRUISE and the SOF and REAP. And really, it's this collaboration that we are trying to pull together in order to bring our collective experiences and expertise to the benefit of countries. So a bit more about the pillars themselves. One of the things that we've been seeing in many of the countries in which we're operating is that often one of the pillars may be functioning quite well, but another is not, or they are not really connected. So as you can see here, there really is a requirement for the 4 pillars to come together. I chair the Pillar 1 group on risk knowledge, and in too many countries, we see risk knowledge that is produced, but not actually used. It's not used to target where are the most vulnerable populations or where's the exposure. So just making the linkage between Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 or Pillar 3 and Pillar 4 is already a challenge in its own right. And we also know in too many countries as well that even when alerts are provided, it doesn't necessarily lead to early action. It's not triggering the type of response needed. So the disconnect between the pillars is one of the issues that we're really trying to address through better coordination. So the programmatic approach that is being followed globally has been, I would say, guided by a high-level executive action plan that was launched last year at the COP, an advisory panel that is at the principal level of the UN, but also the private sector and other organizations, which is trying to guide and provide high-level leadership for this initiative. We have established a global interpillar coordination mechanism that meets on a weekly basis, but also various tools to support countries. And all importantly, a monitoring and evaluation framework that will allow us to track progress in countries. Our aim is to build off of what already exists, and this is critically important. Several regions, such as Africa and Latin America, already have regional coordination mechanisms in place. So it's really trying to work through the coordination that already exists and strengthen it where there are still shortcomings. And at the national level, a real key objective is to establish or to strengthen national coordination. Many countries, what we see is that there are different projects on early warning, but they are not necessarily brought together under a type of a coordination platform. And so the opportunity to optimize these different projects is sometimes lacking. Over the course of the last year, the different pillars have been working on products and tools that can support countries. So for example, on Pillar 1, we have identified the use of risk knowledge as a gap. not necessarily the production, but the use. And so we are working on a toolkit that will identify some of the key decision-making processes on early warning and the types of risk knowledge that are needed to support these. And this will be rolled out to countries. Pillar 2 is obviously working on different elements related to monitoring forecast, and SOF, which is the Systematic Observation Funding Facility, is already moving quite quickly in countries to provide the type of support needed on forecasting. Pillar 3, which is led by ITU, is very much focused on helping countries put in place the appropriate mechanisms to issue alerts. And Pillar 4 is focused on ongoing anticipatory action, which I'm sure you are all aware of is a very important development in the humanitarian system, preparedness activities, and really trying to ensure that the local level is at the forefront of all of the work that we're trying to achieve on early warning for all. Sorry, I'm trying to run 2 machines at once. It's not so easy. As I mentioned before, monitoring and evaluation is critical, and the group has developed a theory of change for the initiative, and the M&E framework has been drafted to allow countries to track progress in these critical areas. We do issue an annual Target G report. As Mami Mizutori mentioned, Target G is a part of the Sendai framework monitoring, which is able to track progress in countries. We do lack data in many countries, and so it's not just about developing the framework, but also supporting countries to do better tracking of their early warning systems, but also to scale up our work on disaster loss accounting and disaster loss tracking systems. A dashboard is being developed that will allow us to really see how progress is occurring across the world, and also a maturity index. One of the aims of the Early Warning for All initiative is to ensure that countries each have the minimal core capability in early warning. We know it's not realistic to expect that countries will have the gold standard, but our aim is really to ensure that at least the minima is in place, because with the minimal core capability, countries are able to save lives and to preserve livelihoods. The type of work that we've been doing over the last several months has been what we call the country level rollout. Now, there is already a tremendous amount of work going on early warning, as mentioned before. So this is not a project that comes in and tries to squeeze a space in the country, but rather it's trying to mobilize high-level political commitment to early warning. And we've been doing this through having the governments, with the UN resident coordinator, often convene multi-stakeholder consultation workshops. And the aim of these consultative workshops is to take stock of where countries are with their early warning systems. The aim is to demonstrate sometimes a multitude of partners that are working on early warning, from the multilateral development banks, such as the World Bank or the Asian Development Bank, to community-led organizations. And what we're seeing is that often these different organizations that have early warning projects are not necessarily aware of the other projects that are in the country, nor are they necessarily following a common agenda or a national roadmap. And so one of the aims is to really strengthen that coordination, that information sharing, that political leadership and buy-in, but also, where necessary, to help them see where they may still have gaps despite the different projects that are in the country, and to identify some immediate technical support requirements that could be filled. And obviously, those countries that have national roadmaps, that's great. Sometimes they need support with developing their financing strategy. But we're also seeing that several countries do not have national roadmaps or plans. And so the effort there is to help them develop a multi-sector, multi-scale, and multi-sectoral stakeholder roadmap that really crowds in the different initiatives in the countries into a form of a common national agenda. And we've also been working quite heavily on helping to develop funding proposals for this initiative. When the initiative was launched, it wasn't launched with $100 million portfolio funding attached to it. So a lot of the work that's been going on over the last months has been to work with the Green Climate Fund, to work with crews, to work with different bilateral donors across the pillars and at the country level to scale up the funding and financing that's available. My next slide is just to let you know where these national consultative workshops are taking place. We started in the Maldives, Tajikistan, Ethiopia. This week is Madagascar. So as you can see, one country after the other is stepping up and starting to pull together the national consultation that we feel is the backbone of this initiative. I'm happy to say I was in Ethiopia last week for the National Consultative Workshop, and it was really quite interesting. The highest level of government were there, ministers from the Ethiopian Meteorological Institution, the equivalent of the National Disaster Management Agency, the Ministry of Water and Energy, but also the Ethiopian Red Cross movement, civil society groups, representatives of people living with disability. And this is a country that has a roadmap, but they didn't have an implementation strategy. So over 3 days, we really crafted the priority interventions that would be carried out by this wide range of stakeholders to help them develop their implementation strategy and also to support the strengthening of a national coordination mechanism, as well as to look at what are different financing opportunities in the countries. Every country is slightly different how they're approaching it. And there has been a certain amount of preparatory work that goes into these national consultative workshops to make sure that there's no cookie cutter approach, but really the aim and the ambition of the workshop is to help the country identify where they are currently and where they need to go in the next months and years in order to build a sustainable early warning system. Finally, some of the work that has been carried out at the global level is to make available resources to countries. So we have developed various tools. We have a toolkit for countries which allows them to look at models, for example, of coordination mechanisms, terms of reference, a checklist of a minimal core capability, which is built very much on the SEDIMA. That's the Latin American checklist. So not at all trying to reinvent the wheel, but really just trying to consolidate information in a one-stop shop, and obviously also to provide technical support to countries. We also are developing some specific tools that we hope will help countries. I mentioned the Pillar 1 handbook, which will be used across the 4 pillars, the M&E tools, but also we are developing with the Center of Excellence for Disaster and Climate Resilience, a handbook on how do you scale up early warning systems in countries that are characterized by fragility, conflict, or violence, understanding that the traditional mechanisms that are used in countries are not necessarily those that will be most effective in countries that are facing high levels of fragility. And there will be this week in Geneva on Thursday, a full day workshop on how do we improve early warning systems in fragile contexts, and a great interest in rolling this out because we know that it is often the countries that face levels of fragility that are also those that are least likely to have robust early warning systems. So this was just a bit of a taste of where we are with the Early Warning for All initiative. I will be here all of today. We will have a session this afternoon on learning and the type of learning that we hope to bring to the Early Warnings for All initiative. But again, I'd like to thank Carina and the team for organizing this conference because I feel like there's a lot that we can learn from all of you as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Laurie and Mami, for giving us that wonderful overview and some really great points of progression as well in terms of concrete step forwards and outputs. So that's really wonderful. And we're really grateful again, Laurie, that you've made the time to come and join us today. We appreciate that you're a very busy lady. So thank you very much. So before I move on to our final speaker for the session, I just wanted to highlight that we do actually have quite a large online community. So we have around 340 people who've signed up online to join us. And we really want to try and make sure that we engage with some of you guys online as much as possible. Pablo Suarez, who's been taking the next section, will kind of kickstart that. But please, online folk, please do engage with us on social media and use the Twitter hashtag. It's not Twitter anymore, it's X, isn't it? So, but nobody knows what X is. I'll keep calling it Twitter because I'm old school. Please do send comments or questions in each session. We'll have a moderator in each session who will be able to pass on questions to any panelists. In that sense, we want to make sure that we're really engaging. This first session is always a little bit more about setting the scene for the day, and then hopefully we'll be a bit more engaging. So lastly, I would like to hand over to Pablo Suarez, who is part of the Red Cross Climate Centre, who links applied knowledge and climate risk knowledge. He's originally a systems designer who's turned into a humanitarian worker, innovator, game designer, extraordinaire person, and he's also an artist of residence at the National University of Singapore. So we are really happy and delighted to have Pablo, who is going to hopefully get things moving a bit forward. I think Diana just needs to come up one sec and assist, but yes, hopefully we shall all be good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carina. All right, so now comes the part where trouble begins. Usually for these events, we need to understand why we're here, hear from the most senior people, the most experienced, the ones who can open the gates for institutional transformation to happen. Now, friends online, friends in person, friends old and new, we're gonna get you to work. What we're going to do is to, can we? Oh, I see. Oh, sure. All right. So I need to be muted. That's a good metaphor for what needs to happen in the foreseeable future. We are going to invite you to share with everyone what is in your mind. We're going to be playing a game that is simultaneously collaborative and competitive. The game is called I Think We Think, which is about helping us think what we think other people think, and what we think about the thing that brings us together, which is creating effective warnings for all. So I ask you, what are you thinking of when thinking of creating effective warnings for all? While the technology enables us to go into the digital platform that will help us play, think inside your head, what one word comes to mind when you think of effective warnings? Don't say it, it's a secret for now. What is the one word that comes to mind when thinking of effective warnings? In a few moments, you're going to be asked to share that secretly through a digital platform. Similarly, what one word comes to mind when thinking of for all? What word comes to mind? There isn't a wrong word. If you're thinking cantaloupe, whatever, that's your word. Maybe you're thinking something else. Maybe there are other priorities of what comes to mind when thinking of for all. In the game, when we ask you to say what words do you think of when thinking of for all, you cannot say all or for. You have to use some other word. And the third one is my favorite. This is a conference that, thank you, Carina and team, so much. It's not called early warnings, or it's called creating effective warnings for all. Creating. We don't think of ourselves as creators, but as we heard, we have to do stuff that doesn't exist, right? So what word comes to mind? Am I able now to plug the thing? What words come to mind? Excellent. So that's what you have to do. Friends online, friends in the room. bit.ly/creating effective warnings for all, CEW4A. Or you can use the QR code. I am told that friends online can see this in their screen. Otherwise, I'll repeat the website that you have to go to, bit.ly/CEW4A. Can you wave your hands if you're seeing a website? Excellent. Most people are seeing something. I'm going to tell you what will show there. Friends online, I'm about to change screen, so please type that thing or use the QR code, bit.ly/CEW4A, creating effective warnings for all. This is what you should be seeing. On the top left, the default is that your name is anonymous. If you want to be recognized as the winner, change that to either your real name or nickname. It could be Pablo Bot, for example. So that if you win, we know it's you. If you stay anonymous, it's okay. And then, in the first row of text, please write one word that comes to mind when you think of the word creating. You cannot write the word creating, or create, or creative, or created, or creationist, or any of those things. What's in your mind? Write that word. There's no wrong word. In theory, you could write two words that make a concept. So if I were asking you about animals, you could say lion, or cow, or dog, or Black Panther, which is one animal made of two words. But don't write an essay, right? Or an abstract, or a tweet, or an X, whatever the things are called. In the second row, so first row, what word comes to mind when thinking of creating? In the second row, what comes to mind when thinking of effective warnings? Write something there. One word, or two words that make a concept, like Black Panther. What comes to mind when thinking of effective warnings? And finally, on the third row, what word comes to mind when thinking of for all? One word, it cannot be for all. I'll give you 20 seconds or so before I start the countdown. Whatever you write is your correct answer, but please try to avoid typos because we're going to do some. Oh, by the way, you have to click the yellow button, submit. You may need to scroll down before the countdown. The countdown is starting very soon. Actually, it's starting now, if I push the right button. Did that work? Yeah, you have very few seconds left. Oops. All right. So now I'm going to move on to the next screen, where in theory, you're going to be asked, what do you think other, whoops, what am I doing wrong here? Other thoughts? I thought I had done the right thing. This is technology being slower on me than on others. Let's see. This is bizarre. My apologies. Oh, come on, don't do this to me, technology. I knew that technology. You know, like in early warning systems, sometimes technologies can do stuff to us. Other thoughts, next screen. Okay, I'm going to start asking you while I try to push the buttons correctly. What do you think other people answered? So in each of those rows, you're going to write, what do you think other people wrote? Come on, website, why are you doing this to me?
On the same page as you.
Yes, there we are. Now you should be in the right page. Yes. What do you think is in other people's minds? So if you think that everyone else thinks exactly the same as you, write exactly the same word. But if you were somewhat peculiar and you think that other people are thinking something else, write whatever you think other people were thinking when thinking of creating, when thinking of effective warnings, and when thinking of for all. Here's the trick. Every time someone else wrote that word, you get 1 point. You're trying to get as many points as possible. And if you write them in the correct order from most frequent to least frequent, you get 5 bonus points. Guess what? Your goal is to get as many points as possible. So I'm going to give you less than a minute. What do you think is in their mind when thinking of creating, when thinking of effective warnings, and when thinking of for all? You have about 30 seconds. Remember, you have to push the yellow button submit in the bottom, otherwise nothing happens. What are those people thinking? Those here, those online? By the way, this is a very equalizing game. There's no second-class citizenry for those online. You're just a peer player, like everyone else. I'm gonna give you less than 20 seconds. What are those people thinking? And about 20 seconds, about 10 seconds, if the button works, start countdown. Yes. 7 seconds, remember to push the yellow button, submit. Uh-oh, time is up, and time is up. So now when I push this button, we're going to see how many points each of you got. So in my case, I got 0 because I didn't send anything. How many of you got 0 points? Wave your hands. 1, 2, so most of you got at least 1 point, it seems. How many of you got 3 points or more? Wave your hands. Okay, we have a lot of successful people. So now I'm going to show you the word cloud. On the left, what people actually think. Inclusive, inclusion, communication, imagination, collaboration, equity, innovation, community. On the right, what you guessed. Wow, you were guessing quite prominently about inclusive or inclusion. So those folks may have gotten many points. I see technology more prominently featured there than here. I see innovation more prominently featured here than there. What patterns do you notice? So what we're going to do, because we have in theory 1 minute left before the end of this, is people in person. When I say ready, set, go, you're going to stand up, find 1 or 2 people you don't know, and share something you notice here that matters to you about the coming 3 days. What do you notice? What do you want this time to be about? Friends online, I'm going to push a button and invite you to annotate some cartoons by our friends, the artists Eugenia and Ham, so that you can view some cartoons and annotate. Friends on the room, you're going to have to act quick. I'm going to make a screen capture. All right. Stand up, find a partner, have a conversation. You have 3 minutes. Ready, set, go. 1, stop and silence. Thank you for bringing back your attention. You can stay standing or sit down if you want. Now, this is usually the part where we invite some people to say some of what they found, etc. We're not going to do that. We're going to invite you to keep this conversation alive, involving all that you wrote and more, as well as, if I can push this button successfully, for those of you who were on Zoom, you got to see about 8 cartoons with a range of things, from mental health and how are we dealing with children who don't know how to ask for help, to how do we come up with new ideas, to how are we actually measuring whether we communicate better or not. All sorts of things about implementation, how lost do we get. There's all sorts of things that can come. I can't invite you enough to give your time to Ham and Eugenia, our resident artists, who will listen to you attentively, create art without ever saying who said what, and then you will notice how much it invites us to think about what we need to do. Thank you all. Thank you, Carina. May we have a wonderful time.
Thank you, Pablo. So before we just go to the break, I just wanted to say that we have got some fresh cartoons that are coming in. So we will get those printed and put them up downstairs as well. So we've got some previous examples from Ham and Eugenia, but we've got some new ones coming in already, which are really quite exciting. So that's brilliant. I just wanted to say that for those online, from the sessions from now on, we will have someone monitoring and addressing your Q&A. So we did have one question in the Q&A, and we will respond to that and ask you to ask that in a different session today, and then hopefully that will get addressed by a panel fully. So thanks for that question. So we're now going to go to a break, and when we come back from the break, there are 3 sessions going on in parallel. So there's a session in this room, there's a session downstairs in the Leolin Price Lecture Theatre, and there is also workshops going on in the seminar room. So if you're upstairs where the reception is, there's like a little bridge that goes across. And from that bridge, you then turn right, and there's the big area there where the workshops will be. Now, just before we go, Lorna, do you want to come up and could you do like a 30, like just a quick overview? Is that all right? You ready or not? If you're not, it's fine. Okay, right, okay. So no, come on, Lorna. I want you to show. Come on. Just want you to show a little bit about what you're doing and what you're up to. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of what our graphical representer is doing, just so you get a bit of an idea of what's going on and what will be going on in the sessions. And obviously Lorna will be then polishing it all up a little bit further as we go ahead.
Can I take this?
Yes.
Sorry, preliminary. All right, now it's the right way around. Yes, so what I'm doing is I'm sketching and taking all in the information that you're talking about that are being said in the panel discussions and in the different talks, and I'm just gonna, like, this is all preliminary now, I'm gonna clean this up a bit and add the word clouds that you've just seen here. I'm just gonna pick out some of a few things and tell you to tell you the structure of how I'm working. So Carina said in the beginning that we need to invest in the future of warning systems to create these robust and clear warning systems with these different areas and with a lot of interdisciplinary collaboration. I'm just going to zoom down here. There's an increasing number of disasters with local conflict and increasing cost also of these disasters, which often start local and then create global and systematic impact. And I've added also here the idea of a multi-sectoral risk reduction idea, so to include all of these different agents in this work. I'm just going to zoom over here. And Loretta also talked about that half of the globe is not covered by these early warning systems, and that there's a lack of data in many countries, but the idea to create these dashboards with these 4 pillars, then to have these national consultative workshops to create roadmaps and sustainable early warning systems to learn from each other. That's one of the main points that I got from this.
Thank you. So if you missed any of it, there it was. Enjoy your tea, and we'll see you back at 11:15 in your respective rooms of choice. Thank you so much, everyone.